There is a diner on the edge of Bismarck, North Dakota, that has not changed in 40 years. Red vinyl booths gone soft and cracked at the seams, a chrome napkin dispenser on every table, a window that fogs at the corners in winter so that the streetlight outside becomes a smear of gold in the dark. 16 years ago, on a January night when the snow came sideways and the buses had stopped running, I sat in the last booth of that diner with $11 to my name, 20 years old, 4 months pregnant, and nowhere on this earth to go. I have come to think of that booth as the place my real life either ended or began. Depending on a stranger I would not understand for 16 more years. My name is Jess. I am 36 years old now, and I am a social worker here in Bismarck. I spend my days with people on the worst nights of their lives, the ones sitting in their own version of that last booth, with their own $11. And there is a reason I do that work, and the reason is the woman I am about to tell you about, whose name I did not learn until this past winter. I should tell you what I do all day, because it is not an accident, and you will understand why by the end. I am the person they send in when a family is coming apart at the seams, when there is a teenager about to age out of foster care with nowhere to go, a young mother one bad week from losing everything, somebody sitting in an emergency room or a shelter or the back of a county office with that particular flat look in their eyes that I know from the inside, the look of a person who has stopped believing in the other side of the thing. I sit across from people in the last booth for a living, and I am good at it, not because of my training, though I have that, but because of a January night 16 years ago, because I know something most of my colleagues only studied. I know exactly what it feels like to be invisible and out of road, and one small mercy away from a decision you can never take back. I learned it in a vinyl booth at 20, and a stranger taught me, in 90 seconds, the only thing that has ever really worked in this job. That sometimes a person does not need a program or a plan. They just need someone to see them, and to tell them there is an other side, and to mean it. Let me take you back to the booth. I do not enjoy telling this part, but you cannot understand the rest without it. At 20, I had made a mess of things in the way only a young person with no safety net can. I was pregnant by a man who had made it very clear the baby was my problem, and then disappeared. My mother and I were not speaking. My fault as much as hers, a stupid, stubborn rift I was too proud to cross. I had dropped out, lost the job, lost the apartment, and that January night I was, quite literally, between the last place I could stay and no next place at all, riding buses and sitting in all-night diners to stay out of the cold, with a duffel bag and a winter coat that wasn't warm enough, and a problem growing inside me that I had, sitting in that booth, more or less decided I was not strong enough to keep. I want to be honest about how dark it was. I was not just out of money. I was out of the belief that anything would ever be okay again. And when a young person runs out of that, the next thoughts that come are very bad ones, and some of them had started to come. I had been proud, once, in the way that only the young and the cornered can be proud. I had left home swearing I would never crawl back. I had believed, when I got pregnant, that I would figure it out, that I was tough, that I did not need anyone. And then reality had peeled that away from me, 1 week at a time. The job, and then the apartment, and then the friends who turned out to be the kind you only have when things are easy, until I was down to a duffel bag and a coat and a city bus that ran a loop I had memorized to stay warm. I had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. I had stopped, somewhere in there, even being scared, which is the dangerous part. Fear at least means you are still fighting. I had moved past fear into a kind of flat gray arithmetic, doing sums about what would be easier for everyone, sums a person should never be doing alone in the dark, and I was doing them in that booth, with my hand resting on a belly that was just starting to show. That is how far down I was when the woman in the next booth looked up from her book. I had ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a bowl of soup, to justify sitting in the warmth, and I was making it last, and I was crying a little without really meaning to, the quiet leaking kind you can't stop, when I became aware of a woman in the next booth. An older woman, maybe in her 60s, alone, with a cup of coffee and a paperback, The kind of woman you would not look at twice. I caught her watching me, and I looked away fast, embarrassed, expecting the look people give you when you are visibly coming apart in public. Pity or distaste, or that quick flick of the eyes back to their own business. But she didn't look away. She just gave me a small, steady nod, like she'd seen me, really seen me, and then she went back to her book, and I went back to my soup, and I thought that was the end of it. When I went to pay my check, the waitress told me it had already been taken care of. The soup and a sandwich and a piece of pie I hadn't ordered, all paid, and the waitress slid across the counter a folded paper napkin with my name. No, not my name, I hadn't given it. Just folded, with something inside it, and nodded toward the door, and the booth where the woman had been sitting was empty, and through the fogged gold window I could just see a figure in a long coat walking away into the blowing snow. My hands were shaking when I unfolded it, and not from the cold. I had braced, the way you do when life has been only taking from you for months, for it to be something that would cost me a tract, a lecture, a phone number with strings attached, the kind of help that comes with a hook in it. I had forgotten by then that help could come without a hook. The 220s fell into my lap first, and even those I stared at like I did not understand the shape of them. And then I read the note, and I understood that a person I would never see again, who would gain absolutely nothing, who did not even want my thanks, had simply decided that I should not go under that night. There is a particular thing that happens to you when you have been treated as a problem for long enough, and then someone treats you, with no agenda, as a person worth saving. It does not just help your situation. It reaches into the part of you that had started to agree you were worthless, and it says, quietly, no. You are wrong about yourself. Here is the evidence. Inside the napkin were two $20 bills and a note, written in a small, neat, old-fashioned hand. I have it memorized because I have read it 10,000 times. It said, I was you once, in a night like this, and a stranger did this for me. You do not owe me anything. You cannot pay me back, and you should not try. When you are able, years from now, do this for the next girl in the last booth. That is the only payment. Keep going. Someone is on the other side of this who needs you to keep going. Keep going. Someone is on the other side of this who needs you to keep going. I sat in that booth, and I read it until the words swam, and something in me that had been letting go quietly took hold again. It was not the $40, though God knows the $40 mattered that week. It was being seen. It was a stranger looking at the worst, most invisible night of my life, and deciding, for no reason, with nothing to gain, that I was worth a sandwich and a piece of pie, and $40, and the trouble of a handwritten note. It was the line "you cannot pay me back," which took the one thing I had no more of, the ability to owe anyone anything, and lifted it off me. And it was someone is on the other side of this who needs you to keep going, which I understood, sitting there with my hand on my belly, to be about the baby. Someone needed me to keep going, so I decided, in that booth, that I would. I want to be careful here, because I do not want to make it sound simple, like a movie, like one kind note flips a switch and the darkness is gone. It was not like that. The darkness did not leave that night. It took years, and help, and my mother, and a great many hard mornings to really lift. What the note did was smaller and more important than a cure. It bought me the next day. That is all, and that is everything. When you are where I was, you do not need your whole life fixed. You cannot even imagine your whole life. You just need a reason to still be here in the morning, one more sunrise of borrowed time, because as long as you keep getting to the next morning, there is a chance things change, and if you go under, there is no chance at all. The note got me to morning, and then I used the $40 to get to the morning after that. Survival, I have learned in my work, is almost never one big rescue. It is a chain of next mornings, and somebody just has to help you reach the first one. I kept the baby. Her name is Grace. She is 16 now, the age I keep measuring the whole rest of my life against, because she would not exist without a stranger's pie and a folded napkin on a snowed-in night. I called my mother from a payphone the next morning, swallowed my stupid pride, and went home And we mended it, slowly. And she was there when Grace was born. I went back to school. It took years, and it was hard in ways I will not bore you with, but I clawed my way up out of that booth, and I built a life, a real one, and I never once spent that note. I laminated it, eventually, when the napkins started to fall apart, and it has lived in my wallet for 16 years, the single most valuable thing I own. But I want to tell you about the part that ached all those years, because it is the heart of this. I could never thank her. I did not know her name. Her face was a half memory. I had no way to find her. And there is a specific torment in being saved by someone you cannot repay or even thank. The gratitude has nowhere to go. It just builds, year after year, with no outlet. The note had told me not to try to pay her back, to pay it forward instead. And I did try to live that way. It is, honestly, the whole reason I became a social worker, sitting now on the other side of the table from people in the last booth. But there was always this hollow place, this debt I carried, not as a burden exactly, but as an open question. Who was she? Why did she do it? Did she know? Did she ever, in all the years, wonder what happened to the crying pregnant girl in the diner? I wanted, more than I can say, to find her and tell her. It worked. Whatever you did that night, it worked. There is a 16-year-old girl alive because of you. You should know that before you die. I did try to live the note all those years, even without knowing her name. I have quietly paid for a stranger's groceries when I saw the math going wrong at the register in front of me. I have written my own version of that note more than once and tucked it where a person at the bottom would find it. In my work, I have bent rules and stayed late and driven kids to placements on my own time. And somewhere underneath all of it was always Pearl's handwriting. Do this for the next girl. The marching orders of my whole adult life. But I will be honest that paying it forward, real as it was, never quite filled the specific hollow of not being able to pay it back. I wanted her to know. That was the thing, not to repay her. She had forbidden that. But just to find her and say the words out loud. It worked, you were right. I kept going. Come and meet the girl who is alive because of your pie and your $40. I had a whole speech. I had been rehearsing it, on and off, for 16 years. This past January, on Grace's 16th birthday, I did something I had thought about for years. I drove out to that diner, still there, still unchanged, the same red booths. And I sat in the last booth, my booth, and I ordered soup and a piece of pie. And I set the laminated note on the table in front of me, and I just sat with it, this little private anniversary of the night my life turned. And the waitress, an older woman who'd refilled my coffee, glanced down at the note as she passed, and then she stopped. And she picked it up, gently, and read it. And her face changed, and she said, "Oh, honey, that's Pearl. That's Pearl's hand. She's been doing this for 50 years. Pearl. Her name was Pearl. She was still alive. 82, the waitress said. Still in Bismarck. Still came into the diner on Sundays. The waitress had watched her do it dozens of times over the decades, quietly pay a check, and leave a note for someone who looked like they'd hit the bottom. Always the same kind of note. Always the line about the next girl. I was not the only one. I was one of dozens, maybe more. A whole secret congregation of people Pearl had pulled back from the edge of the last booth. None of us knowing about the others. Each of us carrying our own laminated miracle. I sat there in my booth, the waitress's words still ringing. That's Pearl. She's been doing this for 50 years. And I felt the strangest thing come over me. A feeling I did not have a name for at first, and have since decided was something like awe. Because in that one sentence, the whole shape of it changed. I had carried this for 16 years as my private miracle, a singular bolt of grace that had struck me alone in a blizzard. And now I was learning that I was not the only one struck, that the woman who saved me had saved, the waitress thought, dozens of others, quietly, for half a century, in that very diner and others, that there were people scattered all over this state, grown now, living their lives, raising their children, who had no idea they shared a secret grandmother, a stranger in a long coat who had decided, on each of their worst nights that they would not go under either. I was not the protagonist of a miracle. I was one note in a song Pearl had been singing for 50 years, and the song was bigger and older and more beautiful than my one verse of it, and I needed, more than I had ever needed anything, to go and find the woman who had been singing it. I found her. The waitress gave me a way to reach her, and a week later I sat in Pearl's small warm kitchen, an old woman with bright eyes and papery hands, and I put the note on her table, and I told her everything: the blizzard, the soup, the baby I almost didn't keep, the 16-year-old named Grace who was alive because of her. And here is the thing that I did not expect, the thing that taught me the deepest part of this whole story. Pearl did not remember me. She was kind about it and gently honest. She said, "Sweetheart, I've done this so many times over so many years, and you all blur together into one face, which is the most beautiful face I know." She did not remember the specific night that was the hinge of my entire life. To me, it was the most important moment that ever happened. To her, it was a Tuesday, one of hundreds, a small, ordinary kindness she scattered like seed and never stayed to watch grow. And then she told me her own story, the one from the note, the "I was you once." 60 years before, Pearl had been the girl in the booth. 19, alone, desperate, in a different diner, in a different town, on a different bad night. And a stranger, an old man with a newspaper, had paid her check and pressed a few dollars and a few words into her hand and told her to keep going and to someday do it for the next one. And she had kept going. And she had spent the next 60 years being the stranger, paying it forward, hundreds of times, a one-woman chain of mercy stretching across 6 decades, and God knows how many saved lives, all of it sourced from one old man with a newspaper whose name she never learned either. The kindness did not start with Pearl. It came from before her, and it will go on after her, and she was simply a long, bright link in a chain that has no beginning and no end that anyone can see. Before I left her kitchen that day, I asked Pearl the question that had been under all the others for 16 years. Why? Why keep doing it for 60 years, for strangers, with no thanks and no way of ever knowing if it worked? And she looked at me with those bright old eyes, and she said the thing I have written on a card on my own desk now. She said, "Honey, I'm not doing it for the next girl. I'm doing it for the old man with the newspaper. It's the only way I've got left to thank him, and he's been gone 50 years. You can't pay it back, so you pay it down the line, and that's how you carry someone with you. You become them for the next person." I brought Grace to meet her a few weeks later. My 16-year-old, who exists because of a stranger's note, sat in that warm kitchen holding the papery hand of the 82-year-old woman who made her possible. And I watched the chain reach across 3 generations in a single room, and I understood that I had not come to the end of Pearl's story. I had come to the middle of it. Grace is a link now, too. She already knows the note by heart. If you have ever been saved by a stranger you could never thank, or if you have ever wondered whether a small kindness even matters, then this story is for you. One word in the comments, if it found you. Forward. Just that. It is for the stranger in the last booth who lifted you when you had nothing, and for the chain of mercy that is holding up far more of us, right now, than any of us will ever know. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one, before I go. The first, the people who save your life are almost never the ones you get to pay back, and you have to make your peace with that, because the gratitude will eat you otherwise. I spent 16 years aching to repay a debt to a woman who, it turned out, did not even remember the loan, because to her, it was never a loan at all. That is the secret hidden inside real kindness. It does not flow in circles, back to the giver. It flows forward, down the line, from each rescued person into the next. Pearl could not pay back her old man with the newspaper. He was long gone. So she paid it forward, for 60 years. The only way to honor the person who lifted you is to stop trying to face backward toward them and to turn around and face the next person in the last booth. Your gratitude was never meant to return to its source. It was meant to travel. The second. You will almost never know what your small kindness did. Pearl scattered mercy for 60 years and stayed to watch none of it grow. The night that remade my entire life was for her an unremembered Tuesday. So do not wait to be kind until you are sure it will matter, until the gesture is big enough, or the moment is clear enough, or you'll get to see the result. The pie and the $40 and the 90-second note that saved my daughter's life cost Pearl almost nothing and earned her nothing she ever knew about. The crying girl in the last booth, the tired stranger, the person who looks like they've run out of road. You have no idea at all, what your sandwich and your steady nod and your you can keep going might set in motion 16 years down a line you will never get to see. Be kind anyway. Especially anyway. The chain only holds if each of us is willing to be one link in the dark. The people who save us are almost never the ones we can pay back. So stop trying to repay the stranger who lifted you and go be one. Kindness was never built to travel backward, only forward, from each rescued life into the next. I'll see you next time.